Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. The Carabao Cup semi-finals, Arsenal win at Stamford Bridge, but the tie is still alive after two second-half goals from Alejandro Garnacho. Not a great night for Robert Sanchez, we've said that before. The real fun was at St James's Park the night before as we all stared at the legs of Pope, Haaland and Tau for 5.5 minutes. There was a football match either side of that VAR decision, and Turkey's injury time goal gives Man City a big advantage. And then to Afcon, let's hope the final between Senegal and host Morocco is marginally better than last night's semi-finals. Meanwhile, Sid joins us to talk about Xabi Alonso's demise at the Bernabeu. His successor didn't have a great start last night, losing to second-tier Albacete in the Copa del Rey, the best scenes anywhere last night. There's a Premier League preview, the Manchester derby, a nice start from Michael Carrick. To Stamford Bridge then, Chelsea 2, Arsenal 3. Liam Rosenior's first game in charge at the Bridge. And I guess, Philippe, given how depleted Chelsea were and how surprisingly strong Arsenal's starting 11 was, it was quite a good, close game. I mean, Arsenal had chances to go 4-1 that could be very different, but it's nice that it's in the balance.
It is. It was actually a very good game. So contrasting semi-finals between the Afcon and the Carabao Cup, I must say, it was not quite exactly the same kind of sport. We'll talk about that, or we won't. And I think that the difference in squad strength was demonstrated when you look at the bench that Arsenal had for this game, which was just completely crazy. David Raya, Jesus, Eze, Martinelli, Norgard, Madueke, Havertz, Lewis Kelly, and Mikel Merino. That's the bench. So obviously, yes, they were up until against a very serious Arsenal team. I think the one thing that I'm a bit surprised, though, that when I read the reaction on various social networks or even in some reports, it's almost as if Chelsea had won, and they haven't. Let's make that clear. They could have lost. They could have lost by a much greater. The margin of defeat could have been much greater. If you looked at the XG, actually, it was 2.7 for Arsenal and 0.6 for Chelsea, which shows a bit what we all felt during the game, that Arsenal had many chances that they could have done much better with. But I think there will be loads of reasons for satisfaction on both camps. I mean, what I was impressed with is the way that this young Chelsea team reacted when they found themselves in pretty bad situation where you thought this could really get away from them completely. Arsenal look slick, they look good, they look well organized, everything. As threatening on set pieces as ever, but they didn't buckle. And in fact, I mean, one thing that really struck me was the first Garnacho goal. If you look at what actually leads to it, 3 Arsenal players lose 50-50s in the middle of the park, which is, Chelsea's by that time, they're 2-0 down, and the Chelsea players are actually hounding the Arsenal players, thinking, yeah, we can do this. And they scored this goal, and now it's 3-2. And I wouldn't say it's in the balance, because there's obviously one side of the balance will be perhaps a little bit lower than the other side. But cracking game, I mean, I have to say, and very, very fine atmosphere. And salute, by the way, to the magnificent moment of union between Arsenal and Chelsea fans who celebrated Gary Neville in a song that I will not repeat. It was so loud that Sky couldn't actually drown it as they usually do when there is a bad word being sung. They couldn't do that, so everybody in the world could hear, this comment about Gary Neville's habits.
He's bringing people together, right?
Yes, indeed. Football unites the world, as Jenny says.
He got in trouble the last time he tried to do that.
Well, that is true. I suppose, Barry, it's interesting. There's a lot of goodwill, I think, for Liam Rosenior, and it was quite interesting it's a small sample size, but he made some changes and they made a difference, Garnacho especially.
Yeah, he made some changes, and he was unlucky that this being his first home game, he was missing so many key players. Reece James out, Cole Palmer, Liam Delap. I wasn't surprised Arsenal played such a strong team, actually, because apart from winning the FA Cup, they've lost quite a few semi-finals, I think. So I don't think Mikel Arteta wanted to take any chances on this one. I mean, while Chelsea lost this game, I think they kind of got away with it insofar as they could have lost by a lot more, and the game looked more likely to end 4-1 towards the end than 3-2. So that goal keeps them right in the tie. I don't think any Chelsea fans would be particularly annoyed by this result. They may well be annoyed by the fact that the first goal they conceded was a corner after 7 minutes. You should probably be ready for that, and they will be annoyed by Sanchez's performance. Because he was the subject of a lot of criticism last season, and there hasn't been much about him in recent months. He seemed to have got his act together and stopped making silly mistakes, but he made a couple last night.
Yeah, he did. And maybe that's because he's sort of been in the spotlight before, Dan, for making mistakes. He got sent off, didn't he, at Old Trafford? I think it was Old Trafford, for a sort of dumb challenge. But he doesn't see, that I suppose the familiar thing you hear is if Chelsea want to win a title, he is not a good enough goalkeeper.
No, I'm continually amazed that he is still Chelsea's goalkeeper. I think he's been their goalkeeper now since 2022, and I tweeted that after he made his mistake last night, and was surprised by the response, actually, because a few people came back at me and said, he's having a really good season, he's been really good this season. But over the course of that Chelsea journey, three-ish years there, he's been there now. Every time I watch Chelsea, he doesn't fill me with confidence. He's in the team because he's good with the ball at his feet. But to me, he looks at a bag of nerves every time the ball's at his feet. His defenders look a bag of nerves every time the ball's at his feet as well. And you can almost forgive that. If a team's asked to play a certain way, they're asked to play a certain way. It's the second goal that's worse for me. That's absolute basics. I mean, they always say when you're a striker, you need something to go in off your bum. I mean, that's like the equivalent for Gyökeres. Like, he couldn't have been presented with an easier opportunity, and that's two mistakes from the goalkeeper, and you're 2-0 down in a cup semi-final. And I know he was good in the World Club Cup final, but I just think in the biggest games, in the biggest moments, that Chelsea team and cannot be full of confidence in their goalkeeper. And when you've spent the money that they have spent, I think they haven't got it right at the kind of back end of the pitch in goal, and they haven't got it right at the top end of the pitch either.
Yeah, and if nothing else, if they brought someone else in, you would have some time where you weren't continually amazed, and you could probably get on with your life. It's like, it's quite hard to do things while you're just continually amazed, isn't it?
I mean, they tried to, didn't they? In the summer, they tried with Manuel. Yeah. They wanted a new goalkeeper, and then that didn't go through, and they didn't try anything else. But that probably tells you that they're not fully confident in him.
Yeah. On Gyökeres, Philippe, he's all did okay. I mean, he scored his goal and everyone seemed very happy for him. And it's interesting now, I guess, with Havertz being fit and Jesus being fit. And I sort of think it'll come good. But I've said this before about Timo Werner, amongst others. So that might be the last thing he wants to hear.
Well, Timo Werner might come good in MLS,
It's true. What's the Arsenal vibe on Gyökeres?
I think there's a school of fans who will say we've got to give him a chance. Remember when Thierry Henry arrived from Juve, it took him 6 months to find his marks and start scoring regularly. And there's another which says, well, we now have the strikers we need at our disposal, and we at least have got to try. Either Havertz coming back or Jesus from the start, as they both look very sharp indeed. So, as to me, I'm more of the first school. I think I'm actually very interested in comparing what's happening with Šeško at Manchester United, because in a way they're two similar players who come with a big reputation, having scored back full of goals in leagues. Well, Šeško, okay, Bundesliga, but back full of goals in leagues which are not quite up to the standard of the Premier League, let's put it that way. Young, perfectible, technically not necessarily the silkiest of players. And I do think he can do something very important for Arsenal. And I'm obviously Mikel Arteta thinks exactly the same. And at the moment, I think the problem is one of obviously complete lack of confidence. He's about a yard slower than he normally should be and would be if he actually felt like he can get that ball. He doesn't. And his celebration was actually really muted. The celebration of his teammates was in many ways more extrovert than he is. He did this silly thing with his, I don't know what it's supposed to mean, the mask or whatever it is. But it was a bit almost apologetic almost. It's like, yeah, I've scored. That's great. I'm sorry I didn't score a bit earlier. He's a work in progress, and I do hope they stick with him, because one thing that had really struck me with Gyökeres when he was in Portugal was that he was a player. He's not a player who is going to put away 90% of the chances that he's offered. He won't do that. But when he missed with Sporting Lisbon, it had absolutely no impact whatsoever in his involvement in the game. He would try again until it worked out. Remember what happened against Manchester City, where I think he missed 2 sitters before that game that revealed him, I think, to many in European football. So he's got to go back in that mental zone. And once in that mental zone, then he will be able to make Arsenal profit from what his excellent qualities in front of goal. Even if he's not the silkiest of players, we know that.
No, but it's interesting because if Havertz is the guy you're competing with, he is a graceful guy, isn't he? And you're this big clumbering, battering ram. But it takes all sorts. Just another one, Philippe. What was that Eberechi Eze? Because since that hat trick against Tottenham, which you felt like he has arrived, he is like a real Arsenal player. It's not really figured.
No, and I have to say, I don't have an answer because I'm asking myself the same question, and and sometimes you felt, Madueke has come on. Or Madueke is playing. Maybe Eze should be playing. Oh, Trossard is playing. And you think, okay. I suppose the team is working well and maybe he's not at 100% physically speaking. I wouldn't have any answers to give to that because very often we go a bit too far because we are not fully aware of what is happening in training and the physical state of the players. So sometimes the decisions are only taken for these reasons.
Right. You've mentioned lots of other good players. You can't pick all of them. John says, should the time for VAR to come to a decision be extended, just to be sure? Newcastle 0, Manchester City 2. Baz, you set the challenge to spend less time talking about the decision than it took. I will put 5.5 minutes on the clock. Let's go. We begin, Barry, with you. What did you make of this sort of farcical staring at the legs of lots of tall people in a crowded box at St James's Park?
Right. Well, I'm determined not to get bogged down in it, so I'm going to presume everyone who's interested knows what happened by now. The post-match consensus appears to have been that by our old friend, the letter of the law, the decision was correct, which is fair enough, but the law in question is an ass, and I can't disagree with that. I think the fact that it took nearly 6 minutes for the officials to arrive at the decision is completely ridiculous, whether it was right or wrong. I think some of the delay is down to the fact that the semi-automated offside machinery wasn't working. Factor in that the crowd are sitting through this and have literally no idea what is going on or why this delay is being heard. Ultimately, they didn't care because they got the decision they wanted. But it was tedious in the extreme. I was doing the minute-by-minute report on this game. The first half was pretty garbage. Johan Wissa missed a very good chance to give Newcastle an early lead. Apart from that, nothing happened. And the second half, things perked up considerably. It was very good second half. City went ahead, not before Wissa had forced a very, very good save out of James Trafford and Bruno had hit the post. Antoine Semenyo scored his second goal in 2 games for Man City. And then near the death of the added time added on for that lengthy VAR delay, Cherki doubled City's lead. So it's difficult to see Newcastle getting back into this tie, but they could have lost by more. One thing I would say, Lewis Hall was outstanding in this game for Newcastle. Just all over the pitch, putting in tackles, getting the ball forward, made a couple of goal-saving blocks. I was so impressed with his performance. Definitely the best player on the pitch. He didn't get man of the match, obviously, because he wasn't on the winning side, but he was definitely the man of the match.
Well, this is interesting, Barry, because you only really did a minute. We've got 4.5 minutes left on the VAR chat. If you want to pipe up, Dan, on this, so you glossed over this huge story because it's tedious. Of course it is. But it's also, you wonder if there'll ever be a VAR check that makes everyone go, okay, we don't need any of this. Like, is this, if this a Carabao Cup semi-final is maybe not a big enough game, but it's just like, God, save us all. This is what nobody wants.
Yeah, and the semi-automated offside's got one job: to work on a match day, and it's not working on a match day, which is a pretty big problem. Ultimately, as Barry said, from Man City's point of view, the VAR check won them the game and got them that second goal, because there wouldn't have been as much stoppage time if it hadn't have been for the VAR check. So they'll see it as being justice done, because obviously when you're on the wrong end of such a tight decision, it's very, very galling, isn't it? It's the correct decision. It's just frustrating when it literally is millimetres. I think Newcastle needed the ties to be the other way around. They needed the second leg to be at St James's Park. I think losing 2-0 at home makes it a tough ask in the second leg. And for Newcastle, they've been a brilliant team in the Carabao Cup now for 2-3 years, not lost many League Cup ties at all in that time. Obviously been to 2 finals, winning one and losing one. So they'll be really disappointed, because their season's been quite bitty so far. They haven't had the consistency that they've had in Howe's really, really good years, and they've got this affinity with the Carabao Cup now. They'll be really disappointed with how that first leg's gone, especially because as well they were up against it was a shadow Manchester City defence, wasn't it? There were so many players missing at the back. Nobody's going to feel sorry for Manchester City with the money they've spent and the riches at their disposal, but that is a really, really weak Manchester City backline. And unfortunately for Newcastle, the first half was awful. They haven't troubled them at all, really, in the game.
Yeah, the second goal was brilliant. Like, it was a really, really lovely move, wasn't it? Just on that offside thing, sorry to... it's my fault now. But, like, it was a subjective offside. So, like, people going, well, you're either offside or you're not. So it wasn't clear and obvious. So they didn't have to refer it. So anyway, yeah, all very tiring. Look, Semenyo's started very well, as perhaps we expected he would for Man City, but they don't always. He's a wonderful player. That is very good news for Manchester City, isn't it? Do you have any strong thoughts, Philippe? Actually, I do have a question for you, because your old friend Arsene Wenger, on these offside decisions.
Yeah.
They're going to talk about this idea of daylight on Tuesday at an IFAB meeting, which is such a brain dead. I mean, it's such a terrible idea to bring in daylight as the way to manage offside, because it would make every defend deep. Because you could play the perfect offside trap and just have a heel and a toe, and so every defence it would ruin the game.
It's appalling. It's absolutely appalling.
Bad idea.
And it's only somebody who is paid an absolute fortune for doing fuck all for FIFA could come up with such an idea, and that's Arsene Wenger today. And he, before we go to that, yes. I just want to add one thing, putting it there. Pep Guardiola is doing a great job for the French national team at the moment, because he's going to force Didier Deschamps to have Ryan Cherki in the starting 11, and France will have somebody who has a little bit more creativity than a stick in midfield or in attack, because we've got loads of wonderful wingers, strikers, everything. Creators in midfield, we got 0 at the moment, but he can play that role. To come back to Arsene and the thing, it's also, I think, one of the very first time that one would be happy to have EFAB, where the 4 unions are represented. So 4 votes for basically the United Kingdom, and 4 votes for FIFA, and all decisions must be taken to a majority of 6 votes. And in this case, the Brits have decided not to play ball and to say that's a stupid idea. And they're absolutely right. Probably wrong for the wrong reasons, because I can't imagine they would be right for the right reasons, but they are right. And they are in favor of what they call the torso rule, which I think we can more or less all understand, is that when there is a marginal, perhaps, offside position in movement, blah, 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 show a little bit of leniency. The idea that daylight, I was looking even yesterday, if you looked at the Chelsea Arsenal game, there would have been, I think, 1 penalty given and 1 goal scored, probably, if Jesus would have been a penalty, for example. When he was clearly offside and was stopped in the box. That, with the Arsene law, would have been a penalty. It would have been absurd, because he had gained a huge advantage, obviously, on the Chelsea defender. The thing that I don't understand is that we are looking for objectivity here, when what we should be looking is impartiality, which is not the same thing at all. We all have an idea of what is right and what is not right. Everybody who's ever played football, refereed football, knows when somebody has an impact on the game. That's fine. That's the law. Like yesterday, did Haaland really have an impact on the Semenyo goal? No, He did not. There's no way that the keeper would have saved that flick. No way.
He was not penalised for blocking the keeper. He was penalised for blocking Malik Thiaw's any attempt Malik Thiaw might have made to reach the ball. And I think that's fair.
That is fair. That is fair. But I think that we all feel that it's not quite right, because this type of situation happens on literally every single goal. But anyway, that's not the point. The idea that you have daylight and between a defender, as you say, we would go back to the old laws before the 1920s, which was changed. The offside law was changed because, well, simply teams were defending so far back that there was actually very little football played, because you can't run that risk. It's a stupid idea. It's absolutely stupid.
You paint a great image of Arsene Wenger. Just, he's in an office on his own and he has a button, and then every couple of months the buzzer goes downstairs. They go, "Oh God, another idea. Arsene's had another idea. Somebody go up and find out what it is." Anyway, before we end part one, by the way, I put this in the group. Actually, we saw the Newcastle United Supporters Trust have been in an advert, Barry.
Yeah, well, Saudi Airlines have made this advert to promote, obviously, their own airline and to promote tourism in Saudi Arabia, where by showing how many great sporting events they show, using boxing and wrestling and those electric cars, Formula E, I think it's called. And Newcastle Supporters Trust, when Saudi Arabia took over Newcastle and cynical people like us and others accused them of sports washing, Newcastle fans took grave exception to this and said it was nothing of the kind. And now the Newcastle Supporters Trust, who at the time said they would be critical friends of the Saudis and have since not uttered a single word of criticism about them, they were tasked with recruiting extras to star in this ad, which features Yasser Al-Rumayyan marching along to St. James's Park, surrounded by Newcastle fans. And it just seems a bit off that these Newcastle fans are actively promoting the regime that owns them now. This is what it's come to, as I suppose we thought it would. But the only sort of heartwarming thing about it is that a lot of Newcastle fans have responded to the Newcastle United Supporters Trust tweet about this advert. A unique opportunity available to members, they describe this as, and a filming project rather than a sports washing project. But a lot of Newcastle fans have reacted with distaste to the manner in which these Newcastle fans are being used or volunteered for this exercise in propaganda.
The timing is also particularly distasteful, when we've just learned that at least 356 people had been executed by the Saudi authorities, establishing a new and grim record in 2025. So, yes, so good for the Newcastle United supporters who can see through this obfuscation. It's shocking obfuscation.
Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. So to Afcon then. Blimey, these games were not good, I think it's fair to say. It's a semi-final, right? It might be cagey if you're being generous. Senegal 1, Egypt 0, and Nigeria 0, Morocco 0. Morocco winning 4-2 on penalties. Egypt didn't manage a shot on target until the last minute of injury time in their defeat to Senegal. You watched all of that, Barry. How much fun did you have?
It was terrible. It was one of the worst games of football I've ever seen. And to be honest, most of this Afcon has kind of passed me by, not because I'm not interested in it. I just don't. There's so much football on that we cover. I don't really have the time to watch a lot of Afcon. I've dipped in and out of it and watched it when I could. But I watched both semi-finals. This was dreadful. And there's no point in wasting much time on it. Senegal won. They just about deserved to win. They were the only team that tried to win. And Egypt's approach to the game was baffling. It was disgraceful. They made no effort to to try and score, and they've got Mo Salah, Marmoush up front. You've got these guys. Give them the ball. They might do something with it. But no, they just sat back, defended dourly, and got exactly what they deserved from the game, which was knocked out of the tournament. And you would imagine the coach will lose his job. If he doesn't, I mean, he should lose his job, because it's a great opportunity for them to get to the final, and their approach stank to high heaven.
It was not the first time. I mean, I know Asasu and Wilson and lots of people we've handled who've been to Afcon have said, Egypt actually have a history of playing, some of
I saw a clip,
the most anti-football of all time, yes?
I saw a clip Wilson did on social media about, he was at this game, and he said it's not specifically an Egyptian thing, it's a North African thing.
Well, Nigeria and Morocco, I mean, I don't know, you can't, I mean, Morocco and North African as well, but I don't know if they're totally to blame for this game not being great. Philippe, it just wasn't great, was it?
It was better. I mean, on the...
it was better, yeah.
It could not have been worse.
On the Shito-meter, the Senegal-Egypt game was at 11, and I think we turned the button down to about 6. Because they actually did try to score goals. I've actually really enjoyed watching Nigeria, if I can say so, throughout the competition, because at least they've tried with a team that is a bit of this and a bit of the other side. There are some very, very good players, some players who are not quite as good, and some players who are struggling a little bit. And Morocco as well, I have to say, the amount of pressure that they're under, those players, and this manager, is unbelievable. It's just unbelievable, because you've got the World Cup coming in 2030. You've got another Afcon probably coming in 2028. First African team to reach a World Cup semi-final. They're world champions at under 20. You could carry on like that. Their clubs are doing well. There's been huge investment in football, a little bit like what's happening in Hungary with Orban, by the way. In Morocco, in terms, you've seen the stadiums, which are absolutely magnificent, blah, 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 blah. There's an awful lot. And then they're expected to win, because I heard that and I thought, this must be wrong. They haven't lost at home for 16 years.
November 2009, last
exactly.
time they lost a home game.
Now 39 games unbeaten on home soil. When, that's like somebody who's only be singing at the open mic at the pub, who suddenly gets to play Carnegie Hall, and there's a lot of pressure there. So I can understand, and I have some sympathy for both teams. I thought the second semi-final was cagey, was not what we were expecting, but at least they tried.
Yeah,
and in the end, I think about the right result was reached for many reasons. Morocco did have more shots on target. They did try to create more. But I have to say, there was one reason why this game actually I didn't mind watching it, is that we had one of the great performances, the greatest individual performance of this Afcon, which was Calvin Bassey, was absolutely phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I don't know if he plays like that for Fulham. I don't quite think so. But he was absolutely incredible. And even though he would have missed the final if Nigeria had qualified. And that in itself, that was... He was the man of the match, and he was on the losing side.
Yeah, those yellow cards are
crazy.
A bit, yeah, it's nuts. So Calvin Bassey, if Nigeria had gone through, Calvin Bassey would have missed the final because he got 2 yellow cards in the knockout stages. Senegal have gone through. Habib Diarra from Sunderland, he will miss the final because he got 2 yellow cards in the knockout stages. And Kalidou Koulibaly is also suspended for the final because he got 2 yellow cards in the knockout stages. I think he also got sent off in the group stage, but it's for the 2 yellows that he's missing the final. I think he's probably going to be injured anyway, but they need to sort that out. It's you want the best of both teams in the final.
That rule's been taken out of pretty much every major competition as far as I know. So I can't understand why Afcon wouldn't make it uniform and do it as well, because that rule's been atrocious since I've been watching football. But it's gone from the Champions League, World Cup, Euros. It's gone from everything else. So the fact that it's still at Afcon is amazing, really.
And the fact that Calvin Bassey played so well, knowing he would miss the final, there's shades of Roy Keane in 1999, that semi-final against Juventus there, because it must be very upsetting. And the yellow card he got yesterday was thoroughly undeserved, It wasn't even a foul.
I actually think I saw an interview with Roy Keane from years ago where Fergie was praising him for this, and Roy Keane was typically Roy Keane going, "Well, what do you want me to do? It's my job, isn't it? It's just like, it's just like a postman. Don't praise a postman for posting letters. Don't ask me that question. I'm insulted. You asked me that question. It's just sort of classic Keano. Anyway, to Manchester United, they go to Manchester City. The game of the weekend, Dan, it's a baptism of fire for Michael Carrick, who has managed Manchester United before in 2021. I think I knew this. He won 2 and drew 1 of his 3 games in charge. So what do you make of the appointment?
He had some tough games in that spell as well. I think he drew away at Chelsea and beat Arsenal in that little spell that he had. So decent track record. I've got a feeling that Manchester United might turn up for this one. They've got a track record of every now and again in a big game, they take you completely by surprise. I've got a feeling that they'll be running harder. They'll be working harder. Something might come together. And City have been a little bit stodgy in the league recently, drawing a few games. I've got a feeling that the crowd will be up for this one, and Manchester United have got the chance to do something here. And
listen, they're on 32 points, which is 1 point off 5th, 3 points off 4th. So, sort of, from sort of the crisis, sort of the ever ongoing crisis, Philippe, they could finish in the top 4 this season.
Yes, and would we be extraordinarily surprised if that were the case? I don't think so, because we've got 2 teams which are clearly ahead, one which is doing its best to hold on to their coattails, and then behind that's like, good luck, guys. Good luck, guys. So they might well be in the Champions League next season, and when we look back, we'll think, well, actually, that the reason why they're in such a position is because of this run of 3 wins on the trot with Ruben Amorim and, whatever. We don't know. It's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. As to the Manchester derby, I was looking actually. The results have often come against, I was going to say, not the run of play, but what you would have expected in recent years. Even when Manchester City have been flying, they've always found this it's a very strange one. It's a very strange one. So there's no reason why they shouldn't be able to do that. They will also have Brian Mbomo back. Yes, sir.
Okay.
And Ahmad back.
And he's good. He's good at football.
They're very good at football. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm looking forward to this one. And especially against this Man City
me too.
defense. That could be fun. I mean, even though I have to say, we didn't say that, but honestly, Man City having a front 3 of Doku, Haaland, Semenyo, that's absolutely scary. Absolutely scary. So it could be great fun.
Are we concerned for City insofar as Erling Haaland has now not scored from open play in 6 games, when it looked like he was absolutely running away with the golden boot?
Well, it now feels like he'll definitely score a hat-trick this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, you say lots of fun and lots of goals. What won't be fun is Tottenham v West Ham. As producer Joel says, the saddest game in football this weekend. Just how good is Dr. Tottenham? They'd need to be like House to resuscitate West Ham. But, Barry, you can feel it, can't you? You can feel an early West Ham goal and then just it ebbs away into nothing.
It would not be a surprise if Tottenham lost this game, but if they do, I mean, that has to be it for Thomas Frank, really, doesn't it? Obviously, they've signed Conor Gallagher. He may well play if fit. And I think he's a great signing for Tottenham. On the face of it, it could all go horribly pear-shaped, but they've got him for a bargain price, I think, by today's standards. He's a good player. I'm a big fan of his as a player. And let's see what happens when he's thrown into the meat grinder.
Oh, Dan zooms in for the YouTube viewers for his point on Conor Gallagher. Yes, Dan.
Is Conor Gallagher... I'm going to sound like a salty, bitter Villa fan here because we obviously wanted to sign him and he's gone to Tottenham. That's not. I promise you, that's not what I'm doing here. But Tottenham, for me, they've got people that will work hard in midfield. To me, they need a ball-playing midfielder. Is Gallagher going to come in instantly and solve Tottenham's problems, Max?
Do you remember when Gallagher played for England, everyone was furious because he's not that kind of player. I think he's a better version of... And he's not a defensive midfielder. He's a sort of 8. Sid's coming on in a bit, so we can ask him and sort of how he's been for Atleti. But, he does get in the box. He does score goals. But you're right. They still don't have anyone who can pass the ball. So that is, that's definitely on the list. We should mention Freddie Potts in the West Ham programme. 5 people he wants to have dinner with. And he picked Donald Trump, Cristiano Ronaldo, Elon Musk, Ricky Gervais and Ed Sheeran.
He's not read the room there, has he?
Well, I mean, he's read his own room, I guess. Cristiano Ronaldo and Elon Musk would be quite cool to speak to. I listen to a lot of his podcasts. He seems quite cool, he says about Elon. Does remind me of Damien Delaney's fantasy dinner party when at Palace of Napoleon Bonaparte, Chairman Mao, Genghis Khan, Joseph Stalin and Keith Richards. So Keith's got his work cut out, hasn't he, for that one?
Is it bad that the 2 people on Freddie Potts's guest list that I find most objectionable are Ed Sheeran and Ricky Gervais?
I think it probably is. Liverpool-Burnley. Liverpool beat Barnsley 4-1 on Monday night. The Dominic Szoboszlai back heel was the main talking point here, Philippe. A wild overreaction. Conor Hourihane, the Barnsley manager, called it disrespectful. Arne Slot called it weird. I mean, it was sort of, he was clearly playing with great confidence. He'd scored a brilliant goal and he was running sort of past, he was just running sort of the other way. I thought he'd flick it back to the keeper and he just was made to look stupid. But I think it's a bit odd to say it was disrespectful, don't you?
Yeah. No, I think it's absurd. First of all, if it had worked, which it should have, would anybody have said it was disrespectful? Nobody would have batted an eyelid. It's a football skill. It's just like backheeling the ball. Well, not backheeling, it's just passing it back with your studs. We've all done that, tried to, very often with the same result as Dominic Szoboszlai in this particular game. That's true. There was nothing disrespectful.
It was a bit like
that. It was very stupid.
Yeah, who got really annoyed? It was stupid. Who got annoyed when someone tried a Panenka and they missed? It wasn't the Lefay Panenka. Was it Welbeck? And then the opposition got really annoyed with him as if it was disrespectful. Why are you bothered? He's just missed a penalty. Villa play Everton, Dan. Your obligatory Villa minute. Philippe described you as just clinging on to the top 2. Is that how you see it?
I thought it was very disrespectful from Villa, actually. Was what I was thinking at the time. Villa at home, look, I just expect Villa to win their home games because usually that's what they do. Everton are no great shakes at the moment. I think Jack Grealish is back from suspension, so that's always an interesting story when he comes back to Villa Park. I wonder when he's not playing for Manchester City whether he'll get a slightly better reception than he did the last time he played against the club. But I would expect us to win that game, and for as long as we're in touch, I guess essentially we're in the race.
Yeah. While we're on Villa, the Chief of West Midlands Police, Craig Guilford, has apologised to MPs for giving them incorrect evidence about the decision to ban Maccabi Tel Aviv fans, saying it had been produced by artificial intelligence. He told the Home Affairs Select Committee on Monday the inclusion of a fictitious match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and West Ham in police intelligence arose as a result of the use of Microsoft Copilot. In an email to the Home Affairs Select Committee published on Wednesday, Guilford said he'd like to offer a profound apology for the error. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood has declared she's lost confidence in him. The report by Sir Andy Cook, the Chief Inspector of Constabulary, found several errors in how the West Midlands Force gathered intelligence on the risks of Maccabi fans coming to Birmingham. The threat was greatly exaggerated, leaving a safety committee that relied on police intelligence with little or no option but to ban them. It said the force made misleading statements through confirmation bias and carelessness rather than any deliberate distortion, and not through anti-Semitism, nor was alleged to be bowing to political pressure from those in Birmingham angered by Israel's alleged genocide in Gaza. finding a fictitious football. I mean, I know nothing about AI, but like coming up with a game that hasn't happened is sort of extraordinary.
I'll tell you, Max, it's not uncommon. AI does not know much about football. Because I occasionally put things in or ask questions, and the amount of stuff it gets wrong is incredible. So unless you have a fairly good knowledge of football, if you're relying on AI for information, there's a very good chance it will be incorrect. Whether it's injury news, players, there was one thing I looked up recently. They still had Eberici Eze as a Palace player. Just all sorts of things. It's not to be trusted.
Right.
You need to check.
Insert your own joke about it would fit right in on this panel, etc., etc. Rest of the games we'll cover on Monday. Chelsea, Brentford, Sunderland, Palace, Leeds, Fulham, Forest, Arsenal, Wolves, Newcastle, and Brighton versus Bournemouth. That's on Monday night. But Sid Lowe joins us in just a second, and we will talk about the demise of Xabi Alonso. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. Let's go to Madrid. Sid Lowe's here. Hey, Sid.
Good morning, Max.
You were in Albacete last night, where they beat Real Madrid in the Copa del Rey. You sent some great pictures. I mean, before we get onto the Real Madrid story, what a night for them.
Yeah, and I'm glad you've done that, because, of course, everyone's talking about Real Madrid, and everyone always talks about Real Madrid and defeats like this, but it's quite nice to talk about the other team for a while. This is the first time Albacete have ever beaten Real Madrid. This is a team that's 17th in the second division, 1 point off relegation, that's really struggling, that was playing with their subs. And then everyone's looked at the Real Madrid team and gone, well, it was full of subs. Well, so was their team. The guy who scored 2 of the goals as well, I love his story. I admit that I've done this at pace, but kind of going through the list like that. I think he's playing for his 22nd club in five different
Some finish. The winning goal is great.
It's gorgeous, isn't it? He runs through. Admittedly, if Lunin comes out, the move doesn't even happen. But Lunin sort of doubts, so he runs through. He gets the first shot. He rebounds back to him. Comes back to him. And you think the chance is gone. He just does this really gentle little kind of clip into the corner. He's from the Canary Islands. 8 or 9 years ago, he gave up football because he said his head wasn't in it. He wasn't in the right place. He wasn't mentally feeling good about it. Didn't want to continue being a footballer, because those 22 clubs in 5 countries, they're mostly lower level. Greece, Cyprus, Romania. He's been Austria. In Spain, I don't think he's played in the top flight. Or at least not since the very, very start as he was coming through. And he gave up and he became an electrician for a while. And he put Real Madrid's lights out.
And the sparks flew last night, etc. How much do you think Xabi Alonso would have enjoyed watching that game last night? Or was he too nice?
I was one of the many, many, many recipients, I'm sure, of a photograph of Xabi Alonso as he just turns back to the bench and a little smile crosses his face. And that was doing the rounds last night. There's been a lot of discussion about this, and I think it helps Alonso in the short term, at least, because a lot of the discussion has been along the lines of this shows that it's not about the manager. Now, in truth, I don't think many people really thought it was. Now, look, they did, in that Alonso wasn't able to impose his ideas. He wasn't able to get through to the players. And, of course, that is partly his responsibility. But I think in terms of, if you like, a kind of a public perception of who to blame for Real Madrid's problems, the finger was very definitely pointing at the players, not at him anyway. And so this kind of... This has helped, if you like, to make the debate a bit broader, to make the debate a bit more structural. But admittedly, obviously, it's only one game, and Arbeloa in his first game. I mean, talking about the jokes about electricians and so on, but for 20 minutes last night, the fog came down and you couldn't see anything. And they were, without doubt, the best 20 minutes we saw from Real Madrid.
Look, so much, whenever, the discussion turns to Real Madrid, it's about, look, you can't have a manager that has a structure. It's just vibes. They just need a vibes man. You've got all these egos. There was some footage, which actually you can explain after the Super Cup, of Mbappe and sort of waving at Xabi Alonso and sort of dismissively. What was happening there?
Yeah, okay. So this, I mean, I must admit, when I first saw this and the explanation of this, I found it so hard to believe, in terms of that can't seriously have just happened, that there was a bit of me thinking, please, there's got to be another explanation. Now, another explanation has been offered up, but it's come a bit late and it feels a little bit like an excuse. So let me explain the scene for you. Barcelona's players are going up to get their medals, or about to go up to get their medals, and it looks very much like Alonso is waving the players over to say, we give them a guard of honour. Mbappe is, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 metres away from him, saying, no, sod that, and waving the players off, saying, we're not doing that, come over here instead. And what happens is there's a sort of a pause as people kind of look around, and then they go with Mbappe. And Alonso sort of shrugs and gives up and goes in Mbappe's direction as well. And as a kind of a portrait of, wow, who really is in charge here, it's very powerful. Now, the alternative suggestion has been that this was about a kind of a phalanx of photographers and cameramen and so on trying to get the Barcelona image, and that Real Madrid was standing in their way. So it wasn't quite as direct as saying, well, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing what you say, as no, this is the place to stand, which obviously is far less dramatic. But as a portrait, as an image, it's very powerful. Now, and of course, because so much of the discussion in all of this has been about manager authority, players doing what they want, not so much about tactics and so on, although obviously that plays into this, but about culture and about kind of dynamics and people, basically.
Yeah. And so what's the answer then? I mean, is Arbeloa the answer?
Right. Well, no, Arbeloa is not the answer, which isn't to say that things might not go okay. Arbeloa is not the answer because the question is broader than that. It's not just who's on the bench. But the way you phrased it a minute ago was it they just need someone who gives them vibes, who lets them play. And here at heart, I suppose, is the question is that just what they need? And if they did that, would that be enough? Or has football moved in a direction where even if you've got really, really good players and you let someone who says, okay, keep them happy, keep them relatively fit and let them play, is that actually...
Harry Redknapp.
Yeah, get out there and kick the ball about a bit. No wonder in the bloody reserves. But is that enough? And so this is part of the debate here. Now, you look at that Real Madrid squad, and it's nowhere near as good as the squad that won those Champions Leagues. Equally, there's been a shift in the way football was much more about press and high tempo and so on now. Now, that's not to say you can't maybe be countercultural and still win. It's only a couple of years since Real Madrid won the Champions League. You look at Real Madrid's history and it's full of these kind of cycles. The manager comes, wants a structure, it doesn't quite work, he goes, someone turns up and goes, hey, here we go, winning again. Now, you look at the, let's not forget Zidane came in as an emergency coach the first time round. Del Bosque came in as an emergency coach the first time. Ancelotti didn't come as an emergency coach, but he did come at a time in which things weren't working. And this is a story, I've told this before, but I think it's worth reminding people because we sometimes forget it. Ancelotti, his second spell at the club, he phones Real Madrid's chief executive while he's at Everton to talk about potential signings. Have you got any cuts that we could have? And there's a bit of a conversation, and he asks, oh, how's it going, by the way, your search for a manager? And they say, oh, not very well. We can't really get anyone. He said, well, have you forgotten about the guy who won you the 10th European Cup? What? And Ancelotti plants this idea, and they come back to him and go, oh, yeah, all right then. And he wins two more.
Does that work for all Everton managers? Could David Moyes do it now?
Give it a go, just in case.
Just a more sensible question, I guess, then, is Arbeloa the answer, or is a vibes man enough? Is it do the squad have too much power? Are the egos in the squad too powerful to accept a structure tactics guy? In which case, surely they are as brilliant footballers. At some point, would realise we need somebody who can make us be better than this. Or would it take not winning stuff for 2 years to work that out?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, okay? And so much of this on the face of it can be really clear cut, but then, of course, you get all of these nuances. And as you just said, do they need 2 years of failure for people to go, okay, let's do this? Right, now, this is part of the issue here. When Alonso takes over, in theory, it's at the best possible time because Madrid were disastrous last year. Now, if ever there's a moment in which people look at it and think, actually, you know what? We could do with some of this. And of course, part of the point is that Alonso, there was a column from Jorge Valdano, back in October or November time, I think. And the headline, you don't really need to read the rest of it, or the rest of it, as it's Valdano and always is really, really good. But the headline sort of sums it up really nicely. And it says, Xabi Alonso, accused of doing what he was asked to do. And that's essentially the kind of position. So you bring someone in because you want this structure in theory, because you see or you recognise some need for it, but then you don't either have the culture or the people or the authority to follow it through. Now, in all of this, again, it's a bit simplistic to take it to one image, but the image that really sums it up, of course, is Vinicius in the Clásico. Now, so for those who don't, and this is a Clásico that Real Madrid won. This is Alonso's best moment, which turns out to be his worst moment. He takes off Vinicius with, I think, about 15 minutes to go. Vinicius comes off in a half, goes straight down the tunnel, says, right, that's it, I'll leave the team then. Oh, you don't want me? Right, I might as well just leave, shall I? I'll just get out of here, will I? And he walks off. Now, this is in front of 80,000 people and however many millions of people are watching at home. In front of Alonso, no attempt to hide it, a direct challenge. Now, the challenge itself is a problem, obviously. But what's the problem really is what happens next. And what happens next is nothing. No reasserting of the manager's authority. No attempt to deal with the, if you like, the behaviour of the player. There's a public apology from Vinicius in which he names everyone but very pointedly doesn't name the manager. And so at that point, the manager's authority is gone. And so any attempt to reinforce that is, if you've got a manager who's trying to do things that players don't like, at some point you need some higher authority saying, well, tough shit. But no one did.
Right. So it's Florentino Perez's fault.
Well, I mean, in the end, the culture comes down to that. Now, obviously, all of this is nuanced again, because with this structure, with this system, with these ideas, with him as president, they've had phenomenal years. But in this kind of environment, yes. And also, there's another thing here, which is, of course, that Florentino was not particularly enamoured with the idea of Xabi Alonso in the first place. There are other people at the club who wanted to bring him in. And actually, this is a recurring theme as well, is that for the most part, Florentino tends not to believe in managers, because he is a player's man in terms of what he thinks the driving force of football is. And so you get, again, it comes back to that thing we're saying, on the face of it, it's clear cut, but it's nuanced, which is that in theory, this is what they wanted. But did they want it enough to follow it through with all its consequences, to reinforce it the way it probably needed to be reinforced? And the answer to that, I think, is no.
And are the fans still they love the Galacticos? It's hard not to love Vinicius and Mbappe, right?
Wow. Okay. Well, so here's the thing, right? So yes and no, because of course everybody loves a superstar player, but Vinicius has been booed and whistled a lot this year. Vinicius, the fans' finger at the moment is pointing at the players. Nobody ever asked for Alonso to be sacked. Nobody ever whistled Alonso. They whistled the team. They whistled individual players, and Vinicius in particular, but no one went for Alonso. So this isn't a decision that is backed by, if you like, a kind of a public uprising in feeling against Alonso. This isn't a lot of people saying that manager's shit, get rid of him, bring someone else in. And so now that, I think, makes the club's position even more difficult, because nobody was watching Real Madrid this year. And I think it's worth saying this because it can sound a little bit, if we do this analysis, like we're saying Alonso is entirely blameless and what the hell did they do? No one can have watched Real Madrid this season and said they were any good. They really weren't. And of course, a manager carries some of the responsibility for that. But nor was anyone saying, right, there wasn't, as I say, there wasn't this upsurge of opinion that wanted the manager sacked. There just wasn't.
Sid, Jude Bellingham has taken to social media, as they say, to react with anger, righteous anger, to suggestions that he was part of the group of players who wanted Alonso out. Do you know, is his fury justified?
Well, I think his fury is justified in terms of feeling like people are pointing at him individually, rather than this being a kind of, if you like, a collective culture breakdown. From the way it was put to me, the relationship between Alonso and Bellingham wasn't bad. But it is true that but Bellingham's quite a difficult piece to fit in, and certainly to fit in with some of the others. And his position has changed, and his frustration, I think, has been clear as well. This is a guy that came in the first season, wasn't expecting it, but was converted into sort of centre forward. A guy running from a high position in midfield, scoring loads of goals. Suddenly, Bellingham's got 20 goals. Oh, this is ace, isn't it? And then he gets moved, and he gets moved a little bit to the left, a little bit behind the forward, a little bit as a central midfielder. And it's certainly true that his fit with Alonso hasn't quite happened. And it is also true, and I've kind of enjoyed this game a little bit, that Alonso gets sacked, and you've almost got like a countdown clock, or sort of a list of players. Right, who has said goodbye and thanks, mister? And you go, oh, tick, 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 and we get into the second day and 7 players haven't even said anything yet. And one of them is Bellingham, who eventually does. But of course, at that point, everyone's thinking, oh, I better say something. And I quite admire Vinicius, I quite admire Vinicius saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to be such a hypocrite as to do the thing that says, oh, mister, sorry it didn't work out. Thanks, I've learned so much from you. No, you know what? I didn't like him. I'm not saying shit.
Quick one on Conor Gallagher. Dave says Gallagher to Spurs for 35 million seems like a really sensible bit of business for the club. How are they going to screw it up? We've talked about it a bit already, Sid, but like, how do you view it? How do you view, because he was loved in his first season, wasn't he, at Atleti?
Yeah, I just a very quick thing here, which tells you something about the difference, I think, between the two leagues. 40 million euros, 35 million pounds seems like good business for Spurs, which I assume from that statement means that's not very much money. Atletico Madrid are looking at this and thinking, whoa, that's a lot of money. Because, of course, the financial realities of the two leagues, even at the big clubs, is huge. Conor Gallagher started really well, and was seen very much as a Simeone kind of player, very intense, very aggressive, chasing people down, very enthusiastic. I think I remember reading one column talking about him as, he's like a puppy. He's chasing everyone around, and he's really into this. Truth is, he hasn't had the opportunities that he would like. I feel that probably emotionally for him, it can't have been that easy how often he was taken off early. Not just taken off in games, but taken off at half-time. This isn't working. We make a change. The first change is him. And I think it is essentially at heart, I'm going to strip it down to the most basic thing of all. I think if you want a midfielder to run the game for you, from the middle of midfield, the truth is the other midfielders at Atletico Madrid are better at that than him. And I think he, as an extra midfielder, arriving in the penalty area, making things happen, being dynamic, was very good for them. But and I think was quite popular as well, by the way. I think everyone was really, quite pleased with him. But there just were other options that in the end felt stronger. Giuliano Simeone on one side, Nico Gonzalez on the other, if he was going to play wide in midfield, in that classic Simeone thing of playing a central midfielder wide to kind of bolster the middle. But if he's going to be in the middle and running the game, then Koke and Pablo Barrios are probably more suited to it. And that's even without Cardoso, who they signed in the summer and has been injured and will eventually probably play that role.
Finally, Sam says, Dear Max, Barry and the Guardian Football Weekly team, long-time listener, enjoyer of the pod here, writing in for a request from my great mate, Jack. Jack and I moved to London in 2017, have been listening to the pod ever since while attending several live shows, with the stand-up being Earth, where we met several guests, and we're delighted to have Jonathan Wilson regale a story about his excellent figures from an Essex League cricket match the summer prior.
Why doesn't that surprise me? If
2 for 24. If
never meet your heroes.
No, dearie me.
Anyway, Jack is a massive gooner. He's getting married in Barbados in mid-January to his fiancée Liv, who's a Spurs fan. In the loosest possible sense. I've noticed in the last couple of months...
What is the loose sense of being a Spurs fan? Is that like you're only depressed half the time? Or what?
Yeah, probably. Probably my kind of Spurs link, You've got a real club. They're the ones that just make you even sadder at the weekend. I have noticed in the last couple of months that Jack has moved from quiet confidence about Arsenal's title charge to a mild sense of panic, where he's telling anyone who will listen that Villa are outperforming their XG and City are over-reliant on Haaland. With this in mind, I think it will be an absolute treat for him if Barry could, 1, wish Jack and Liv all the best for the big day, and 2, send Jack some words of comfort to allay his fears about the title race over the coming months. Thanks and keep up the excellent work, Sam.
Well, I'd like to wish Jack and Liv all the very best for their marriage. Getting married in Barbados must be doing well for themselves, unless they're going to the cheap part of the island. And as for words of comfort about Arsenal, I have quite a few Arsenal supporting friends who will be utterly insufferable when they win the title. And that's the only reason I really don't want Arsenal to win the title, because I'll have to find a new pub to drink in. And I don't want...
Why don't you go to Barbados and find a pub? That resolves this. Just so
I thought you were going to say find a wife. I thought you were going to say find a wife, Sid. Either way, go to Barbados. Find a wife, find a pub, but I'm with you. Second to Emery's Villa is the dream for the neutrals, isn't it? Sorry to say that, Philippe.